Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia, joined by Noah Taylor, and we are with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And it is Tuesday. Tennessee is preparing for Kent State this weekend. Just wrapped up a big-time win, 51-10 over NC State in Charlotte. We're going to recap NC State and then jump ahead and look at this Kent State matchup this weekend. First things first, a little bit of time has passed from the game. What are your thoughts from the NC State win, Noah?
Again, I think you've had a couple of days now to let it simmer a little bit. And I'm still blown away by what Tennessee did defensively in that game. I think coming in to the season, you knew what you were going to get out of Tennessee up front. You kind of knew what you were going to get out of that second level with Keenan Peely back to health, Aaron Carter back to health. But I think as a whole, this is certainly the best that it's exceeded my expectations, I think. I thought Tennessee could take a step forward defensively this year. But the fact that you're going in against a top 25 team and playing as dominantly as they did, and a team that had some offensive weapons, in that game. Kevin Concepcion was the guy we talked about all week last week. And he was pretty much a non-factor for Tennessee in that game. They went, or for NC State, Grayson McCall, a very experienced quarterback, and the guy was just running for his life most of the game. So I just think that that's been the biggest takeaway for me. I know I sound like a broken record because we've talked about it so much, but it was their first test against some solid offensive pieces, and they passed it. And I think that, again, on a night where Tennessee didn't play its best offensively, you can't help but feel even better about this team after that performance, because now you can look at last year. We talked a lot about that Texas A&M game when Tennessee didn't play well offensively and they had to lean on their defense. Now Tennessee's proven, I don't think the offense is going to take many days off with Nico Imalaevi at quarterback, but now Tennessee's proven that they can lean on that if they have to and feel pretty good about it. So I think just now three days after that game, you got to feel really good about where Tennessee is as a whole.
I think the run game showed itself pretty well, too. Dylan Sampson proved that he's one of the better backs in the SEC and in the country, and that he can handle a big workload. We saw him get the bulk of carries early against Chattanooga. But I was curious, all right, well, what's he going to do when it's a better opponent? Is there still going to be that big workload on his plate? And the answer was yes, and that he could handle it. And he finds the end zone twice on two really nice runs and rushes for over 100 yards, his all-purpose yards. Got close to the 200 mark. So I think as well as the defense playing really well and as well as the defensive line playing at an elite level, it was Dylan Sampson. And then even behind him, Cam Selden doesn't play, but Sean Bishop, I thought, had a pretty nice game as well. So Tennessee's running back room, but especially Dylan Sampson, I thought jumped off the page. This was asked over in the Rocky Top forum over at VolReport.com by the Master Man. He asks if this changed our record prediction in any way. I think you were at 10-2 going into the year. Are you sticking with 10-2? Is it now an 11-1? Or for any reason, are you going down a peg? Or just where are you at record-wise through two games?
I'll say that I feel like 10 wins is the floor now for this Tennessee team. Coming into the year, I know – I kind of went back and forth on it in the offseason because I know we'd come to the point where we kind of had to go on record. I think I said 10-2 right after the Citrus Bowl, 10, and then I just decided to stick with it. But there just doesn't seem to be a glaring weakness with this team right now. You just mentioned a second ago, how would a guy like Dylan Sampson do against the first? We saw it against Chattanooga, but again, it's Chattanooga. Their first test of the season against an ACC opponent. There just hasn't been a glaring weakness from Tennessee right now, and there's going to be tougher challenges ahead. In a couple of weeks, they go to Oklahoma in a game that has a lot of personal connections with Josh Heupel, and it's Oklahoma's first SEC game, Tennessee's first true road game. There's going to be challenges in that, but I just feel really good about where Tennessee is right now. And coming into the year, I think you could kind of pinpoint the games that you didn't feel so good about. Georgia obviously would top that list on the road, and Georgia's Georgia. That Alabama game, even at home, you kind of wondered how that would go. I feel really good about that one now for Tennessee. So I'm going to stick with 10-2, but I think that's as bad as that's the floor for this Tennessee team.
Yeah, I'm going to bump it up to 10-2. Going into the year, I was in the 9-3 boat, and one of the reasons was I wanted to see how they would look against NC State, and I thought that could have been an interesting matchup. And Tennessee obviously passed it with flying colors. So you get one of those games down that I think maybe could have looked a little difficult going into the season. Oklahoma's the next one, and one that going into the year I was also skeptical if Tennessee could win or not. But now Oklahoma, I mean, their offense hasn't looked good through 2 games, and especially that offensive line has had a little bit of an issue. Well, that's a big issue if you're going up against Tennessee, who has maybe the best defensive line in the country. So, I've seen enough that I think that I'll bump them up to 10-2 in my mind. But I agree, it could be an 11-1 team. Like, you go into Oklahoma, okay, that's a game that Tennessee's probably going to be favored in. That's a game that's on the road, but you should feel pretty good about considering the way that Tennessee's gone off to the start that they've gone off to compared to Oklahoma's 2-0, but maybe not passing with flying colors 2-0. Outside of that, I mean, Florida is always interesting. Arkansas's offense has looked good, but there's still so many question marks and probably a talent disparity between them and Tennessee. So you're really just looking at Georgia and Alabama past that. I mean, I don't want to completely count out anyone else in the SEC like a Mississippi State or Kentucky or Vanderbilt, but none of those 3 teams have looked very good. I mean, Kentucky just got boat raced by South Carolina, who I don't think either of us are very high on either. So at the end of the day, it is those 2 big games, Alabama, Georgia, that are starting to look like, okay, maybe those are the losses, but also going into the season, I had Tennessee beating Alabama, and I'm going to stick with that. I think they get the job done at home. So when things start to shape out, it's like, okay, well, there is a chance this team could go 11-1. I mean, maybe they do put things together and they can win Athens. Maybe that's an SEC championship appearance. We'll have to see, but things are definitely rolling in the right direction, and it's changed my mind from 9-3 to 10-2 for sure. Now we've been doing the higher lower stuff. Last week we were tied. I think we both got 3 correct in the Chattanooga one. This time you absolutely smoked me. You went perfect this week, Noah, in the higher lower. We started with 0.5 interceptions for the Tennessee defense. We both said yes. Will Brooks gets the job done for the Vols and gets that one to cash. And then we said, will Tennessee have a turnover themselves? And Nico throws 2. You said yes. I said no. So there's the 2-1 lead for you. We said Concepcion, 129.5 all-purpose yards. You said no. I said yes. Obviously, he did not get to that point. So 3-1 in your favor. Nico, 2.5 touchdown passes. You said no. I said yes. He sits just below it with 2.5. Maybe the illegal man downfield saved you on that one with his what would have been a second connection to Kitzelman. But either way, that's going to be your 4th point, and I'm still at 1. And then we both got UT over 34.5 points. You smoked me there on the higher lower. You take a demanding lead on the season. We'll do some more at the end of this, but let's flip the page to this Kent State game this weekend. Tennessee's going to win the game. It would be a complete disaster meltdown. I mean, Kent State, they're coming off 2 losses, one to Pittsburgh. Okay, that's fine. You lose to a Power 4 team. You're in the MAC. That's not horrendous. Losing to St. Francis at home is pretty bad, and that's what Kent State's coming off of. The spread opened up at 47.5 in the favor of Tennessee. Are the Vols covering, Noah?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, I don't really know really what else you can say about it. You got to feel really good about Tennessee going into this game. I feel like even with Chattanooga, you kind of try to not go too astronomical with how many points you score. Like you mentioned, they're coming off that loss to St. Francis. They're 0-2. You look at a ranking of all FBS teams. If you're into that sort of thing, Kent State's among the last, if not the last. This kind of sets up for a game that Tennessee could be incredibly explosive in without trying too hard, I think. And like going into that Chattanooga game, we talked a lot about giving opportunities to guys like the rest of that running back room behind Dylan Sampson. A chance to kind of show all those rotations like they did in week 1 and week 2. This kind of sets up for that, and I just see Tennessee rolling. So, I'm gonna go beyond or cover. They're gonna cover, and I'd go beyond the 47.5 for sure. And I will go with another one here. We'll probably get to this in a minute, so maybe I'm spoiling it or looking ahead. But I say they keep up the defensive streak of keeping teams out of the end zone too. I think Tennessee's playing that good on defense, and you see that go for a 4th straight game.
Yeah, you mentioned the FBS rankings, 134 teams. I've seen on a couple outlets where they do their 134 rankings. I just looked it up to see kind of what I could find to try to find one. I'm not sure how this is decided, but athlonsports.com did one that was released after last weekend's slate of games. And I mean, yeah, you're looking at not only Kent State at 134 out of 134, but what I wanted to see, because I saw one that had them also really low, UTEP 132 out of 134. So there's I mean, it's almost impossible to rank teams when you get that low. But I mean, Tennessee's got two of the worst three, two of the worst two, depending where you look. Teams in the entire FBS on their schedule, and that's not like Tennessee scheduled those games. I mean, obviously you schedule those games expecting to win, but it's not like they did that on purpose. It's just maybe a lucky draw in some way where, I mean, they've played a MAC team every year and they've gotten some feisty ones. Akron in 22 kind of gave them not necessarily run for their money, but kind of a tough physical game. Bowling Green in 21, that wasn't I don't think there was ever a point where Tennessee was worried they were going to lose to Bowling Green in 21, but that was maybe a tighter game than we've seen Tennessee played recently against these MAC teams. And Kent State just ends up being the one this year, and they're not a very good football team. And then UTEP coaching change. That one will be interesting, though. I know that's way ahead, but that's the old Austin Peay coach. So maybe there's a little bit of something there, because Austin Peay played Tennessee as well as really any out-of-conference team that's not Power 4 has, and even better than some Power 4 teams have, like NC State or Iowa or Virginia last year. So we'll have to see how that one goes. But, yeah, I just thought that was funny to look at and kind of see Tennessee's schedule. They're getting the worst of the worst on some of these, and it all starts this weekend with Kent State. Yeah, they're going to cover this spread, though, 47.5. I think they win by 50+. I think they put up a bunch of points. We'll get into some more specifics later. You mentioned that defensive streak, though. That was my next point. I was going to ask if they could keep them out of the end zone. Well, what are they going to have to do to keep Kent State out of the end zone? I'll flip it to that.
I mean, I haven't watched a lot of Kent State this year. I don't know what necessarily, I have an idea of what they want to come in and try to do against Tennessee. I mean, what can you do? I mean, Tennessee did really well stopping the run the other night when NC State, again, a Power 4 opponent, tried to throw the ball. There just wasn't much time for Grayson McCall to do that outside of that first drive. I don't really know what they can do or what Tennessee can do or can't do. I mean, I say just keep doing what you're doing. I think obviously the talent gap will also play a factor in that, and maybe probably throw Kent State off whatever game plan they come in with. But I think you're going to see much of the same that we've seen the last few weeks out of Tennessee. I think you're going to see that kind of Kent State just not be able to gain any kind of rhythm in the game. And I don't know if I'd even go as far as to say is that they may not even get into field goal range with the way Tennessee's playing right now. But, yeah, I'd say just kind of keep doing what they're doing.
The two ways that they're going to score in this game is either with 5 minutes left and Tennessee's got the fourth stringers in and something happens and whatever, you live with it, or some double flea flicker, trick play, fake reverse, and you catch someone not in the right spot and you get a big play. Outside of that, yeah, I don't think Kent State's going to find the end zone against Tennessee. At least, like I'll say, first half, I would be shocked if they find the end zone against Tennessee. I guess really the only other way would be like if there's just a breakdown tackling or something. Like if there's a situation where you have a guy in open space, you would assume Kent State will try to get the ball out quickly with Tennessee's defensive line and try to get it to maybe a receiver out on the boundary and try to make something happen. Maybe you can get someone to miss and then you scamper down the sideline. But the issue with that idea is Tennessee's tackled really, really well in open space. You think to Jermod McCoy taking down Justin Jolie of NC State on 4th and 1, and that's a big tight end who's physical and can like usually punish a cornerback in a one-on-one like that, maybe fight for an extra yard or two and move the chains. And Jermod McCoy does a phenomenal job of bringing him down in space. I mean, Omari Thomas made a big play in space in the game against NC State. So that's an idea. Get the ball out, get it to the sidelines, try to use the entire width of the football field and try to create some matchups. But I don't know if that'll work either, just because Tennessee, they're tackling really well, which I do think is a big deal, because you talk to William Inge before the season starts and you ask him about tackling, and he was like, that's not something you necessarily know until the season starts, because it's a lot different to tackle in scrimmages and things like that than when it's an actual opponent on the other sideline. And so far, I think you have to give Tennessee's tackling like A+, A grade. Like it's been phenomenal through 2 weeks. So it is going to be a really tough task for Kent State to try to really do anything on the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about the running backs, though. I talked about Dylan Sampson. I talked about Deshaun Bishop. Is this sustainable, the way that Tennessee is using Dylan Sampson right now? Like, can they go the whole year and just kind of ride Dylan Sampson as a feature back, or do you have any concerns that could kind of come back to bite them?
Yeah, I think there is some concern there. Just not only that, I mean, what's behind him. I mean, how obviously we've touted Deshaun Bishop. The coaches have. He's done a really good job in the role that he's played. Can he be that guy? You know, depending on how Josh Heupel said that Cam Seldon is anticipated to return this week, but you know, we just haven't really gotten a good look at how the rest of that room will look right now, and I think that is concerning. You know, 2 games in, I think one thing that could help maybe with a little bit of avoiding some of the wear and tear on Dylan Sampson is the way Tennessee can use him. And Josh Heupel talked about that after NC State the other night. That there's just different places you can put him on the field, and he's gonna do really well. So maybe you try to, get him involved in the passing game more to kind of avoid, some of the beating he's going to take, in between the tackles and things like that. But I think it is a concern right now. I think you want to use a game like this, and I know we keep saying this, but you do want to use a game like Kent State, especially going into Oklahoma, to maybe figure out some things and how to get other guys involved. Because I think once you get into SEC play, maybe the clock's running a little bit on how much Dylan Sampson can take. And so far, I think they've done a pretty good job of managing that, considering the load he's taken. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting going forward.
How do you order the guys behind Sampson right now? I know it's Cam Seldon is when he's healthy, he's been number 2, and Deshaun Bishop's been number 3. And then it's going to take your choice of Peyton Lewis or Khalifa Keith. But in your opinion, what should Tennessee do at the running back 2 spot, running back 3 spot, and so forth?
I mean, I think right now, just given the fact that we haven't seen much of Cam Seldon outside of, I can't remember how many carries he got against Chattanooga, but I think you'd have to put Deshaun Bishop there in that number 2 spot right now. Obviously, Cam Seldon, I think, has a bigger upside. I mean, he's a big guy. He's been in the system. He played last year, which Deshaun obviously didn't get to with the injury. But it's tough right now to determine, where he's at, just because he hasn't been healthy enough to play. I think when he is healthy, that answers the question, I think, obviously, but we haven't seen that yet. So I think you'd put Deshaun in there right now. I think he's run well when he's gotten carries. If you were asking me this after the Chattanooga game, I'd still roll with Seldon there. But I thought in the carries he did get against an NC State, a Power 4 defense, he did well. You've seen a little bit of the speed. You saw the speed on him trying to chase down the pick 6, the one touchdown NC State had. But I thought he runs tough, which Darrell Sims talked about in fall camp, on him kind of a throwback kind of runner, an old school type of guy. I think you've seen a little bit of that from him. So right now I'd put him there, and certainly it's almost like you'd have to put, just because of what we know about Cam Seldon from last year, kind of the potential you see there. Maybe it's 1A, 1 or 2A, 2B type of deal with those two. But yeah, I'd put Deshaun 2, Cam Seldon, and then again, I haven't seen a ton out of Peyton Lewis at this point. Another guy coming off injury, obviously. And then Khalifa Keith had a touchdown in week 1 and also has a little more experience as well. But that'd probably be how I'd put the pecking order right now.
Yeah, I think I would completely agree. I've been really impressed with Deshaun Bishop and what he's been able to do in his limited role still in 2 weeks. And, it sucks for Cam Seldon that he wasn't able to play last weekend and kind of put some more on film. But I think Deshaun Bishop has looked really strong all around. He's looked really good with the ball in his hands, but he's also looked really good in pass protection, which is something that's maybe a concern for especially a young back like that. And I thought he's handled that job pretty well as well. So I wouldn't hate to see Deshaun Bishop maybe get a couple more touches here against Kent State and try to really turn him loose and see if you can really start to build anything for him and maybe try to keep Dylan Sampson, keep him healthy, I guess, and avoid some hits if possible. Nico Iamaleava, 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, all around pretty good game. Some issues, really just those 2 interceptions, just 2 poor decisions, kind of on the wrong page, maybe on the first one. And then, but overall, I don't think it was bad. And he's going against a secondary that was dropping 8, rushing 3 a lot of the time. So a a lot of options aren't there. A lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field. So you have 1 receiver less too that's fast and trying to create space. What does he need to do against Kent State to get the ball rolling really fast in the right direction? Not that it stopped rolling, but get those, like, this is the Heisman type of talks going again.
Yeah, I think, obviously they're going to see a different look from, or maybe, I don't know, maybe Kent State takes one out of NC State's playbook and tries to take away, some of those big explosive plays in the passing game. But then again, that's going to open up a lot again in the run game. So I think just to see out of him is just, I kind of hate to use the word consistency because, like you said, he certainly wasn't bad the other night. He had the one pick that, he understood it, I think, immediately what he did wrong, according to Josh Heupel. The other pick, again, probably could have better pocket awareness and maybe eat it there. But again, he got kind of blindsided and the ball came out. So I don't want to make it sound like he did anything, there was these glaring mistakes that he needs to fix here in week 3. But I think to put up those big numbers, just hit on some of those explosive plays. You saw a little bit of it after that pick where he came out and made the big throw, the 45-yard throw to Squirrel White. I think maybe seeing a few more downfield type of things. Like you saw in week 1. I mean, you again, like you mentioned, NC State kind of took that away from him because you had the big performances from Brew and Dante in week 1. Chris Brazzell had a solid game. Not much of that was there. I expect it will be this week a little bit more. And again, probably a game where we get 1/2 out of Nico, maybe a little bit more since it's a FBS opponent. But I think just hitting on more of those downfield plays and, maybe like we just talked about, taking a little bit of pressure off of Dylan Sampson.
I think a successful day with him would mean he's not playing in the second half. It would mean that he's very accurate down the field, and when the opportunity arises on deep balls, that he hits his spot and can convert on maybe a big touchdown or 2. And then also, of course, he just takes care of the ball. You can't turn the ball over at Kent State. You cannot throw a pick against Kent State. You have got to have a clean sheet there. And then I think that not that any smiles faded about Nico, but I think that they remain where they are, and things are still feeling really positive about where he is heading into SEC play against Oklahoma, which will be his biggest test, mainly because of the environment that he'll be walking into. Let's do a higher or lower. Quick hits here. Give me your pick and just a short rundown of why you picked it. UT, do they score 59.5 points, over under 59.5? Do they get to the 60-point mark?
Yeah, I'm going to go over. Just the Tennessee's explosiveness, what we've seen here in the first couple of weeks. I think some of that will maybe depend again on what they do in the second half, but or what Nico's status is in the second half. But I mean, against Chattanooga, he set the last 2 quarters, and Gaston Moore and Jake Merklinger are able to come in there, and Jake Merklinger leads a scoring drive as well. And then obviously the blocked punt kind of helped there at the end, get them to 69. But I think it goes over that. I feel really confident in saying that, which is such a change from week 1. Even when they were playing Chattanooga, I still wasn't entirely sure, just how much they would score. Here we are week 3 against this opponent. I feel pretty confident saying that just because of the weapons Tennessee has. And I think some guys in that second half are going to want to show some things that are, maybe get some Mike Matthews in there since he's seemingly healthier now, and Braylon Staley as well, and maybe see what they do.
Yeah, I'm not really confident, but I will take it. I think Tennessee gets over 60. I think we'll see Gaston Moore throw the ball a little bit. I think we'll see that offense kind of keep the thing going in the second half, because honestly, I mean, who's to say Kent State's a better team than Chattanooga? I mean, Chattanooga is a better team in FCS rankings than St. Francis, and St. Francis just went on the road and beat Kent State. I know it's not always equal to just go, they beat them and they beat them, but I mean, I don't think that this is going to be much different of a game than the one against Chattanooga, and they got over that 60-point mark in that one. Dylan Sampson, 100 rushing yards, yes or no? 99.5 is the line.
Man, to do that 4 games in a row is just it feels crazy to even say it. I'm going to go over. I don't feel as confident in that one, but I think he hits on some explosive runs that are going to certainly help. And ideally, it's tough because ideally he won't play that much in the second half either. And And hopefully for Tennessee's sake, Cam Seldon is healthy and Deshaun Bishop can get, more carries than he's had. I'm going to say over because I think he's going to break off a couple big runs to help get to that number. But not as confident in that one because I think doing that in 4 straight games, no matter who you're playing, is incredibly impressive. And I don't know, man. We should start throwing Dylan Sampson's name around in the Heisman too if he could keep those numbers up.
I completely agree. I think he goes over, and because he probably has like a 70-yarder in there or something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that he's going to touch the ball much more than 10 times, but I think he'll have 1 or 2 where he's just off to the races, and that's going to carry a bulk of it. Nico Iamaleava, does he play over under just halftime, essentially? Does he play past the halftime break is what I'm trying to get at.
Man, I think this week he will. I don't know, man. That's tough because you got such a big game next week. I'm gonna go back. I'll say he won't. I'll say he's out by halftime, like that Chattanooga game, just because of what's laying ahead and how important that game is before SEC play. I think you want him as rested as possible. But I guess I wouldn't be shocked if they throw him out there. But I'm going to say, he'll be done. His day will be done by halftime.
Yeah, I don't think he's playing past halftime either. I'll also say that just like Chattanooga, you get to the halftime break and then you hand the keys to Gaston Moore to treat it like he's getting the start for the second half. 4.5 penalties called on Tennessee, higher or lower?
I'm gonna go lower. I know they had a few problems with that the other night. Of course, some of those were just kind of bonehead things. One from Keenan Peely. Josh Heupel kind of clarified that yesterday, though, and I don't think you'll see repeats of things like that. So I'm going to go under. I think it's going to be a pretty clean game from Tennessee.
I'll go over. I think you'll have some procedure stuff at the end of the game, some backup linemen, some things like that, and then just throughout the course of a football game, stuff happens. So I'll go over, but they should really want to be under. Like it has. That's probably, if you have to pick one thing about Tennessee's start to the season, it might be just unnecessary penalties that could come back and bite them at a later time. So I'd like to see them clean it up, but I think they'll probably sit at exactly 5. Last one, Jake Merklinger. Does he get over under 2.5 pass attempts thrown in this football game?
I'm gonna go over on that as well. I'm trying to think back to. I know he didn't have a lot to show in that Chattanooga game. I'm trying to think back to that drive, how much they used the passing game. I know the touchdown that was capped there was, I think, on a Khalifa Keith run. So, I think you see him pass the ball a little bit more in this game. And again, I think it's just because you kind of have the luxury with the score and an opportunity to kind of build some confidence for him, because that's your kind of quarterback of the future right now. Behind Nico, I know Gaston Moore is the number 2 guy, but obviously you want to get this is a good opportunity for him to throw the ball around a little bit, especially with some games coming up where you might not have that luxury, with it being SEC play.
I'm going to change that one. He was 4 for 4 against Chattanooga. Okay. So I'm going to quickly change it 4.5. Does that change your opinion?
Maybe a little. I'll go over. I'll just stick with it. I think that I think it's a good opportunity for him to air it out a little bit more. Maybe because it was 4 in that game. Maybe the coach staff will want to up that number if they pay attention to those sort of things. But I'll stick with the over on that one.
I'll give him the over as well. If we're saying they're going to beat him as bad as they do, he should be in the game long enough that he gets some throws in. So I'll stick with an over as well. 4.5 is going to be that line. If you're listening, play along in the comments. If you go perfect, we'll shout you on the next episode. So play along in the comments. Let us know your 5 answers for that higher or lower for this week. Me and Noah agreed on all but one. So ours will come down to the penalties to see who wins this week. Noah's got the 1-0 lead in terms of games right now after he took me down in the NC State higher or lower, and then we tied in the Chattanooga one. But you play in the comments. You let us know what you think, and we'll review it in our next week's episode as we prepare for Oklahoma. But first things first, Kent State. If you want to stay up to date on everything heading into the Kent State game, if you want to stay up to date everything that goes down inside Neyland Stadium on Saturday, head over to VolReport.com. Links to everything in these in the description. Thank you for watching.